places. Twitter is generally the place I find out about things that upset me. And I was extremely upset about this. I found out about this and I got so angry that I was like yelling, basically ranting to myself. And it was so bad that it gave me a headache. It's going to be tough to talk about because it's so infuriating. So fucking infuriating.
This is probably the first time that I see right-wingers being outraged, and that's just one video that I showed you, but there's a lot of commentators, especially on the right, that are legitimately offended for the first time. And you know what? I think that's a good thing. I think right-wingers should get offended more, unironically. Because right now you have corporations, especially in the entertainment industry, who are constantly sucking up to progressive ideology because they know that if they don't, progressives attack them. And they know that the right doesn't do anything. But imagine if right-wingers would attack them as well. Then companies would be like, look, no matter what we do, we're going to get attacked. So why can't we just focus on making a good story? Just do what we want to do. Just do what we like to do. And I think that would be a much better system. But it can't happen as long as only one side gets offended. It's kind of counterintuitive, though, like trying to fight offense with offense. But it is what it is. I mean, I remember in Pathfinder, there was one of the developers, and he said that, well, I read a letter from an anonymous source who doesn't like slavery in the world of Pathfinder, so I'm just going to stop writing about slavery and I'm going to remove it from the lore with no explanation. And imagine if there was like a mountain of letters of complaints every day that person would receive from various people for various reasons. He would never get to that anonymous letter. It would be buried under a mountain, under a pile of paper. So I think that would be the solution. But, you know, it is what it is. So why are right-wingers so offended over this thing? What exactly happened? Well, the reason I'm saying that right-wingers are offended is because it's not really natural in the sense that it's not the comic was published yesterday and people who read Superman read the comic and they were offended. No, they actually found out a comic that happened last year, I believe in March. So they found out about it today and now people are spreading it on Twitter and they're getting angry. I'm pretty sure no one has actually read the story. But the story is about Superman losing his powers. And as you can see here, he got captured and he is taken over. Every day they would drag me into the interview room. Every day they would restrain me in a new way that left me exposed and vulnerable. And every day for 8 months, they did things to me. They did things to me while I was forced to look at him, Nikolai Koslov, the commander of the Cheverenai, the Devil of Lubania. And the story continues, fast forward, and Superman is now free, and he is going as Clark Kent to interview this man years later. So it's kind of implied that Superman dropped the soap in prison. It's implied that dark things have happened, and if they did this out of spite to humiliate the character, then yeah, this is a dick move to do, no pun intended. But if it's legitimately a good story, if they did this as a plot narrative, I know I might upset people, but I have no problem with this. In fact, again, Game of Thrones, the thing that made me want to watch it was the fact that Dany was placed in that situation where she was forcefully married with Khal Drogo. You can notice that it was against her will, and I was watching it just to see how she escapes, because I was rooting for her. And believe it or not, a couple of years ago, feminists were complaining about the Joker comic because Batgirl was placed in a vulnerable position, and they put so much pressure on DC Comics until they actually removed the cover. And that was the feminists doing because of the same thing. Now, the feminists didn't know the actual story, which is incredibly dark, but it has Joker going to Barbara's house, not knowing that she is Batgirl, and as she opens the door, the Joker shoots her, and then also does unspeakable things to her and takes photos of that and sends it to her father. So to me, this thing is not really new to comics, like it has happened before. And back then it really contributed to the story. On one hand, you start really despising the Joker. It solidifies him into one of the worst villains that DC has created. And on the other hand, you get to witness how Barbara Gordon manages not to give up. She gets to be in a wheelchair, but she uses her power in order to help Batman by becoming the Oracle. So she's using computer and hacking skills and her detective logic in order to figure out cases and help the heroes from afar, showing that she's not a victim and showing that even though the incomprehensible happened, she has the immense moral fortitude to get past that event and not let that event define her life. And it creates a very interesting story. It's a very powerful character arc. So those things happened in comic book before, and it's important to know why. And I think that for those of you who actually followed comic book history, you know that comic books used to be censored in the past, not by the left, but by the right. So there used to be a time when you weren't allowed to show any blood in comic books, where you weren't allowed to have the villain win in any issue. The comic needed to have a moral story. No one was allowed to be killed in comics, and the hero always saved the day. So after that time of censorship ends, you then go into the era of the grimdark comics, the whole New 52, where everything is dark, everything is edgy, and you get even that story with Batgirl that I talked about, because that is what happens when you censor art. Imagine a spring that you press your thumb against, and you're holding the spring down. When you remove the thumb, the spring is going to jump higher than it initially was. That is exactly the same with culture. Like if you forbid people from showing blood in comics or death, when that censorship goes away, you're going to see a gratuitous level of violence way over than what would have transpired normally. And when you make sure that certain subjects are untouched, then people are going to touch those subjects even more when censorship goes away. And I generally think this is what's going to happen with comic books in the future, because, eventually culture shifts. No matter how powerful progressive ideology might look right now, and no matter how entrenched it may be in the institutions, eventually it will go away. And then when it will go away, you're probably going to see more stories like this with Superman. Because people want to create stuff. Now, again, I don't know whether or not they did this out of malice in order to try to disrespect the character. If they did this out of malice to disrespect the character, then shame on them. But if it's actually part of a story and they wanted to, I guess, try to show Superman's moral fortitude, that even if this happens, Superman is still a symbol of hope, like nothing can shake him. Probably not the type of story that I would have liked to read, but okay. I'm not against it. I definitely don't think that certain topics should be removed from art, because art should be free. Now, politically speaking, and just entirely from an agitprop perspective, the fact that right-wingers are offended and they're livid about it is good. That is good. I don't mind. But don't believe your propaganda, basically, as they say in agitprop land. It's okay to encourage people to be outraged because of this, because, the left is just as cynical. If you go to any leftist Discord server that is doing a organized, concerned campaign, you will notice that they're not really offended. They just use offense as a way of getting power. So they're very cynical about it, and I have absolutely no problem with admitting that people on the right should be cynical as well. And then not even people on the right, people that care about comics. Feel free to be offended and to write concern letters and whatnot. Go for it. Honestly, it's more than needed in today's society. But anyway, if you guys have actually read the comic, because I couldn't find it, but if you did read it, let me know what you think about it in the comment section. Because I'm really curious where they went with that story. And I'll see you all in the comment section. Take care.